What's going on, everybody? How you doing? Happy Tuesday to everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're just catching the stream live, I hope you had an awesome day. If you're tuning in after the fact, I hope you had an awesome morning, afternoon, day, evening, whatever it is. So tonight, what's next? Got a couple of very, very, very exciting announcements coming up here. And I really wanted to take a moment and talk through a range of things that are on my mind, on my heart, but more importantly, that always ultimately boils down to you. And so, first of all, thanks for hanging out. Second of all, thanks for taking the time out of your day. You know, people are busy. These are busy times, and we want to make sure that we make the most out of everything that you invest in your time. So, you know, it's an interesting thing. There was once this really funny church video I saw. I think it was called My Church. And, there was one guy, they wanted seats to the Super Bowl. And then there was this little kid, like, I want a pony. And, the interesting thing is on the opposite side of that interaction is we very rarely, with the right heart and all of that, get asked, what do we really, really want from our church? What do we really want? And I will challenge you, just in the same way I will challenge myself, is ultimately, what is it that you want that has nothing to do with anybody but you and me? And so the great thing about, tonight is that it's kind of like saying, hey, you know what, this is where we're starting the next phase of this. Really some cool stuff coming up that's going to, in many ways, change the positioning of the channel, the positioning of the show, but ultimately, it's all about serving people, and it's also about serving guitar players on this show. And, I know that in my experience, in being in a local church, I very rarely, if ever, been asked, like, hey, what do you want? What can we do for you? And that's not talking about the consumer mentality. I'm actually just going, hey, where are we falling short? And, more importantly, flipping that around in the self-awareness of where do we find that we're falling short? And what can we do about that? So, with that said, I'm hoping that people can chime in here and, lend us your ears and your comments. That would be fantabulous because we'd love to hear kind of what you're thinking. I can see that we've got some folks over there. Hello, Bruce Adolph over there in the chat there. I would love it if people would just kind of share, this is what I would love to see happen in my local church without it being like, I'd like to see them do that. I'd like to know what things you can put your hands to that could be improved. And in turn, I'd love to say, hey, Doug, is there some thing that maybe or somebody at the magazine or somebody that's going to be on the show can help with? Because our mission at Worship Musician Magazine is to help worship musicians and tech teams and everybody get better by Sunday. And as much as we live in a world of taglines, we mean it, and God knows that we mean it. And so, it's a thing. So, if you got some thoughts there, I would love to hear them. That said, why don't we just get to the announcement part of this, because I'm not seeing any thoughts come through yet. So next week, we have my dear friends from Worship Tutorials coming on the show. That's going to be Brian Wall, Brian Michael Fuller there in the middle, and Bradford, who I absolutely love to death. These guys are just absolutely some of the most amazing people. Bradford Mitchell there with the ironic thing is Bradford is this tower of a guy and the neatest person you'll ever meet. All right, wait for it. Here we go. And then the week after that, on the 22nd, yep, we got Droff. I am so besides myself about this. He's one of the biggest influences for so many of us in the worship world. He's a tall tree. He has been so faithful in building the house at Hillsong and being an inspiration. And it's going to be great to connect with him again. Super excited. And then, just when you thought there couldn't even be more, we're going to have St. Pope and Stu G on the 29th. I am so happy to be able to share these guys' collective experience and heart for the house and their passion for guitar and Jesus and collectively what we can do to serve you. So this is the topic tonight is what's new. So over the past couple of days, first of all, we've been getting the current issue ready to go out. At the same time, I've been furiously working on this demo with these Rev amplifiers here. And we are in this amazing time as musicians where, we're dealing with tracks, we're dealing with social distancing, we're dealing with streaming, we're dealing with broadcast mixes, we're dealing with volunteer tech teams, we're dealing with a new bunch of problems where church is anything but perfect. So what can we do to be the difference, right? What can I do to be the difference? I work hard to serve you guys. Yesterday I was up at 6 a.m. and it was about if I do the math, it was about a 20-hour day by the time I was done. But, God, my favorite verse of many favorite verses is, too much is given, much is required, right? So what we are doing at the magazine is we are getting ready to launch a Spanish edition to serve the church in Latin America, as well as the Spanish-speaking church here in the United States. We are working with a number of manufacturers getting ready to do these live streaming events. On Thursday at noon, we're working with our friends at Gateway Worship. We're going to debut a new video from their new album. We're going to get a chance to go through the song story. And we're just kind of going, well, okay, we are a magazine in the digital space, so what can we do on the digital playground to serve our partners and to serve you and to just kind of take this thing through? The Gateway folks are, first of all, awesome. The music is phenomenal, and the video is through the roof. So we're just so excited to just be able to do more. And in endeavoring to do more, it means that we have the opportunity to think about how we can equip people. So first of all, Shell, what's going on? How are you, man? Well, first of all, it is true that, Shell, let me read Sheldon's comment because I presume it's Shell is short for Sheldon. Most worship musicians are all trying to be U2 or Coldplay. Just be yourself. True that. Nobody can be me as well as I can. Nobody can be you as well as you can. It's an interesting thing. All big noting aside, one of the things that I had the privilege to be a part of was the Guitar Hero video game series. That's not the word I was looking for, but that's okay. Um, but that was like the world's, kind of, it was a high profile cover band. Uh, but at the same time, people love covers. So there's this fine line. I remember Joe Satriani was talking about playing the blues. It's like to be in the club, you have to play a certain set of particular progressions with a certain vibe, with a certain tone, with a certain range of, you're within the confines of that, but somehow you're original with that. I think we all struggle with that. And I think, the great thing about the time that we're in is that we are at the magazine working increasingly close with the folks at um, multi-tracks, lost the ability to talk. And one of the neat things is as that relationship has blossomed and continued to bloom, I read a document where they're talking about how to use tracks, and they're like, don't imitate people. And I love that their heart is like, look, we're giving you the vehicle to augment your band. If you really wanted to sound just like Hillsong, you could basically do a Milli Vanilli thing with the exception of the lead vocal. But that's not their heart. Their heart is to equip teams. The great thing about multi-tracks is you could use it to sit there and practice a song and actually never use it for your church service. There's just a range of things that you can do. If somebody wakes up on Sunday morning and, they've got some family thing, pull up the bass track, right? Whatever it is. I don't know why I always pick on the bass players. But in any case, it's there are times, hey, what's going on, Brett? Good to see you. There are times that, we think things are a certain way. And this is my ministry moment for tonight. Is that I would challenge you on the thought, not you personally, on the thought, which is this. I think people are far more afraid of being known for who they really are than actually being able to safely imitate somebody else. And that's sometimes a totally internal thing. Sometimes that's an environmental thing. Sometimes that's a learned thing from childhood. And sometimes that's just getting, I look at failure as school, but not everybody has that type of tenacity where failure makes them just, kind of get up and dust off the knees and just kind of go right back at the wall again. And I totally understand that. So, I absolutely agree with you in that, we want to do that. So that's one of the things that we've got these songwriting columns, and I'm generally pretty good about not going, hey, go read the issue, go read the issue, go read the issue. And you know what? I've actually failed the mission because there is so much amazing content in every issue of Worship Musician that all these amazing writers pour out the very essence of who they are. We're going to fix our inability to help people kind of go, there's a pot of gold. And honestly, in the world of equipping, I do not know of a bigger pot of gold where you can go across so many different things without having to wade through a sea of other video content on YouTube to get to. So we're going to be figuring that out. But I want to know what is, kind of giving you guys, a hard time. What's ailing you? What is it that you're like, I want this show to serve me in getting better at this. I want to know, I want to know about how the gear can take me somewhere. So the amazing thing is I've been on the journey with these Rev amps. And I'm, the interesting thing is those amps in many ways are like the story of my life and arguably our lives as worship musicians. They sound great in the room. They got speakers, But you can also, using the XLR outs, I'll say that 10 times fast, XLR outs on the back of it, utilize the reactive load that's in there and the embedded two notes technology goes straight into Pro Tools or straight into the board. And you've got all this ability to use different virtual cabinets and virtual mics. we're living in a time that for guitar players, it's like the gold rush of tone. And so the neat journey that we're going to take, in what I can do to change what I can change is my Bruce Adolph, who's there in the chat, Melissa Doppler. Hello, she's there too. Oh, that's right. And the magazine, of course, is always free. We give it away because anything that's worth selling is worth giving away. So the idea is we want to go, well, there's not actually that much being done to demonstrate this gear for worship musicians, how you would use it in the church. So we're all over it. And we're going to double down and quadruple down on that. So as guitar players, I would love to, kind of know, the gear that you're like, I really want to know about that. What do you think about using a Strat on Sunday versus a Telecaster or a Gretsch? Kind of the standard vehicles. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You hit drums with sticks because that's kind of how it's done. Gotta love a Telecaster. But the thing is like, what are IRs? What are the different ways that we can use this type of technology to serve us? And, so the neat thing, these amps, I've been living with them, and my favorite part about it is that this whole concept of this round trip that we make as worship musicians, the practice at home where we're playing along with the tracks in theory, the midweek rehearsal when we have midweek rehearsals where we're playing with a team, and then ultimately translating that into Sunday morning or whatever weekend services you do or will do or we'll get back to doing or something like that. And what's neat about this particular experience was I had a chance to check off more check boxes than I've ever had in any amplified situation. And these guys are really awesome. And I'll tell you one more thing about Rev. They're best known for their metal amps. But if you take a look at the name, you notice there's a little tiny bit of a gap between the two V's, as in Revelations 5. Hello! They are believers, and they are awesome. So, in any case, we want to know what you want to know. So how about that? Hang on a second. There we go. I think I see something coming here. All right, there we go. Love it, love it, love it, love it. 14 comments. Bring it on, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. All right, and let's expand that window there. There, Ski. Come on. There we go. Come. Now let's do that. There we go. And so funny. It's really not easy to read these. Josh Nieves, how you doing, my brother? How goes it? All right, let's see here. Okay, Brett. The hardest part from a gear perspective is coming from a half stack. Well, I can appreciate that. To going totally direct with a modeler. That's kind of like going from we're making barbecue ribs to like we're getting ribs at a drive-through. I love a good drive-through. It's a different experience. So interestingly enough, Brett, this is one of the things I'm going to rabbit trail a little bit, but bear with me. So what you were hearing right here is actually my Helix rack in the power amp return of those guys. And they are mic'd up, but they've got great direct out via the XLRs. So the point, because I'm kind of in hog heaven, I'm like, well, if when it's sunny, make hay, right? So I'm a huge fan of modeling. What I love about modeling is that it's kind of it's the best of the solutions in many ways that we've had to work with in terms of not compromising sound for the ability to not have a ridiculous amount of stage volume with guitar and have volume wars where everybody's turning up like we used to back in the days when some of us were getting saved originally. So I'm utilizing the effects loop in these guys running out of the Helix's stereo outputs into the return of those guys in the loops. And so I've kind of got all that stuff happening. I think one of the things is just because we're using modelers does not mean we have to necessarily be robbed of the, guess what, half-stack experience. Take a look. Now, I'm not actually running into the lower cabinets there, but there's speakers on in the room, and I'm using modeling. So I've got all my toys that I can play with. And if I needed to on a Sunday morning, the good news is then I can turn basically the speakers off and use the reactive load and just go silent stage. So the neat thing is that there are other solutions out there. Power cab from Line 6 enables us to do that. But if I could kind of crawl in the midst of your question there, and it's a great question. So let me not dismiss that. Oh, I got the answer right here. But there is an experiential part of that where we're used to interacting with the gear. I'll take that a step further. Actually, I will go down the rabbit trail with you. And hello to everybody else who's putting up comments here. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, oh, look at this. Oh, look at that, Derek. Hello, my friend. Well, look at this. So Derek is kind of like my my best buddy, brother from another mother. And Derek is a marketing genius. He has been kind enough to sit on, I think, 1 or 2 NAMM Tech Track panels, and he's the marketing genius behind Rev Amps. And so the question is, I am with the gain knobs pulled out. So, gosh darn it. So the gain pot on these amps, and just in the final throes of finishing this video for these guys, these amps, they have a pair of 12AX7s, so they're tube. They have a pair of 6V6s, which is the, if you will, the heart and soul of what people love about a deluxe reverb. So they've got this kind of classic Fendery vibe, but you pull the gain control, all of a sudden it opens the jangle. It's just basically, it's like instant infusion of some sort of AC type of thing on top of the Fender foundation. It is something very special. So, I've got all my toys to make all the noise that I love to make. And the neat thing is, again, this round trip that we love to make, when it works out, like, how do we get a great sound at home and then have it be a great sound at rehearsal and have a great sound on Sunday and not have the sound tech lose their mind? I'm pretty much beside myself. So, all right, let's see here. Let's see here. So Brett, getting back to that, it's an interesting thing. John Petrucci, in-ear monitors. Joe Satriani, no in-ear monitors near him. Like myself, I want to hear the guitar swirling in the room. That gives me feedback. I don't know how else to say it. I was given 2 ears to hear with. Now, in certain situations, I'm like, hey, that's not the way it's going to be. But I love and thrive on the ability to hear the sound in the room. First of all, the interesting thing is I'm going to rabbit trail a little bit on guitar tone tonight because I can. And more importantly, I think as we endeavor on these things. Forrest, how you doing, man? Welcome aboard. Hello to you. So the oh, Brett, I'm gonna nibble on that in just a second. So the thing is, his comment about the patches. Now, the great thing about the Worship tutorial guys, I will say this, is that they give away as much stuff as they sell. So there is a kind of, here's the thing. People just want to make a living, and I get it. I have a lot of grace around people just kind of going, they want, most of the people that I know that are in the patch game are really about serving people, but they also want to get paid, which, I'm down with. Back to the whole kind of swirly sound thing. These 2 microphones are Roswell Pro Audio Mini K47s. And the interesting thing is that I set them up at first. I was like, oh, there's not quite enough bass. And when you're miking guitars, one of the ways that you increase the bass is you bring them closer. You build up the proximity. And then it had been a while since I mic'd up a cabinet. I was like, no. Right. There's this strange balance between generally being on the edge of the dust cap, and you can either use your iPhone and turn the light on in there, or you can use one of these guys and kind of shine it through the grill there. And you then are able to see where that is. And then generally with a guitar cabinet, you want to be about 1 inch or 2, maybe 1.5 inches is a safe distance with your average microphone, because if you're too close, you get too much bass. and then you end up moving the microphone a little too close to the center of the speaker where it gets bright, and you lose the perspective. It's kind of like, if you will, it's the audio focus, and that spot that's about an inch and a half away, generally right on the edge of the dust cap, seems to be that spot where you're like, that's where it sounds like what it sounds like. So the point being is that if I can't hear what's going on in the room, then I start to forget the things that are my compass. So it was a really interesting moment to come back to that and kind of go, wait, I know what to do here. And like, boom. And then I listened back and I'm like, there it is, right? So in any case, now let's see here. Pedro, what's going on? Okay, so here's the interesting thing about all of this good stuff. Come on. There we go. Let's do that. There we go. That's how I'm going to be able to see all these comments. All right, first of all, let me just make sure I've seen everything. There we go. Reading through the comments. Look at those rev amps in stereo suite. Oh, I'm in hog heaven. The crisscross color scheme. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm reading through in order here because I'm just going to do that. So, Brett, heading back up here, the hardest part of being myself in a church scene is coming from a heavy metal and hard rock background and not being able to use everything in my wheelhouse. I totally feel you. The funny thing is I had this conversation with myself a day and a half ago. It's like, what would it be like to have, in this day and age, and there's Alter Bridge, which is kind of that, but kind of like, what would it be like to have a Christian rock/metal band, but wasn't, how do I say this, not cheesy, but just like awesome, right? Where it's just like, and that's kind of one of the things, that kind of had this, the next piece of it is like, one of the things I really love about Lincoln Brewster is like, that guy can rock out, but it's still pointing up, right? It's upwardly mobile. And I love that. Josh, again, great to see you. And yeah, the direct bit, it just takes getting used to. And I think, the idea is don't expect my wife Melissa was talking about this place in Dallas where apparently they start serving brisket. They line up at 8 in the morning. They start serving it at 9 in the morning. I'm like, that's my kind of place. But we're not going to get that experience at a drive-through. And I'm not equating the quality of what companies like Line 6 do with a drive-through, but the fast and easy experience. You drive through, you got instant tone, you plug in a couple of cables, and you're good to go. That is pretty awesome. Now, again, coming from the like, hey, let's turn up the amps, let's get the guitar, hearing the amplifier in the room, I'm all down with that. Here's the challenge, and I will say this with love and affection. We want to make sure, I'll use the drummer analogy. This is the best way to say this. It's kind of like watching a metal drummer show up at church, which I've seen a couple of times. And these are lovely guys. Drummers are some of my favorite folks, but they have a tendency to hit too hard for the room. Our gig at church is, and I have to tell myself this as well, I have to learn to play and hit at a volume that is appropriate for the environment. So, you know what? That's where the growth part is for me, and I will, in a friendly, heartfelt way, challenge you to go, what is God teaching me through that? And I will double down and try and go, what is He trying to teach me as well? I love it. Okay. All right, Tim, hello. So what do I think is best? XLR out, the mic, the amp, or direct into the board? What a brilliant question. Now, let me not sound like I'm going sideways. I love all of it. And I'm going to answer that because that's a great question. Lots of rabbit trails on that. Radial SGI, Studio Guitar Interface. I've got a pair of them. So basically what they enable you to do is take the feed, if you will, from your, that was leaning over so you could see the pedal board that's hiding there, which is basically the instrument level signal, converts it to a balanced line level signal, and pipes it off to an amplifier that's been banished to some custodial closet or something at, or some distant corner of the high school gymnasium where nobody can really hear it. Over the drums, I might add. Sorry, I had to get that in there. So the point being is that then you're able to mic it up and do all those things. It's been an interesting thing about the journey with the microphone because if you listen very closely, you may or may not hear the air conditioning coming through the shotgun here. The point being is that I used to be really sphincteronious about any hint of background noise. But I discovered that with the volume that I have a tendency to play at, by the time the track kind of fades out and any delay tails are done, you're not going to hear the air conditioning. So I can track in comfort these days and not feel guilty. I've chilled out a little bit. The point being is that a microphone, the neat thing about it, especially with a guitar amp, it's a great way to capture a signal. So the interesting thing is, to compare and contrast the two things that we're talking about. Brett was talking about, if I may interpolate my experience and over, kind of cast that over his, which is like, hey, you know what? I want to hear the speaker. I want my guitar to hear the speaker. I want my ears and the guitar to hear the speaker because that's going to give me information about how I'm going to hit the strings and whatnot. Unfortunately, church is just not that environment most of the time. But I've learned to kind of, one of the great things about, for example, I said Power Cab before, they've got these little kickback stands. I can face them back away from the tech, sound tech that is, and I can kind of get away with it. And so, that's one of the solutions that I've come up with to at least be able to get the guitar to hear itself. In a perfect world, I want the speakers, and I want to be exactly like my head is right now. Dead center, those things behind me, I'm getting the swirl, my guitar is, the pickups are facing away from the amp, but if I need to, I can do a little turn and the guitar is going to hear it. So, microphone. That feedback loop, when the microphone is placed in the right place, hearing the speakers, the guitar is hearing that, there's sound circling through the room, the PA is speaking to the guitar, the strings are vibrating. That is a magical experience. That said, again, the drive-through analogy, I hope I didn't offend anybody because I do love my brethren over at Line 6. Being able to run direct out straight into PA, it's kind of like, it shouldn't be that good. It's just like, you're just like, really? Like, how did we get here, right? Just the same thing, like running out of the direct out on the back of those heads. It sounds great. I really kind of had to go back and forth because I started using the XLR outs, and I'm like, I'm going to have to really work my mic technique to make it sound as good as those do. And the neat thing is that, just with a little bit of kind of going, right, I remember how to do that. So that's one of the ways that we can get there. So hang on a second. So, so the XLR out, mic on the amp, direct into the board. I think all of the technology has gotten so good. And what's great is these amps are all of that stuff kind of put together. Just crazy good. Great, actually. Okay. Back to Brett's comment, and everything is based on download my patch to get this tone versus how these things work, and here's how to use it to get these tones. Well, fortunately, so before this, there's a guy named Sean Cannell that's kind of my YouTube guy. And I was watching this live stream that he's doing right now, and one of the things he was talking about was asking lots of questions. And I was already tuned in. It's like tonight was like, hey, this is what's coming, but I don't want to miss where the heartbeat of the people that have been here all this time are doing. Like, when Droff and Saint Pope show up, and some of the people that are going to be coming on the show after that, we're going to have some new people that are going to know about what we're doing, which is really exciting. But you don't want to forget where your roots are, right? It's kind of like, and we know that, some people, they show up for a personality-driven thing, and then most of the folks don't stay. But over time, what we're going to do is provide an opportunity for worship musicians to have this very appropriately intimate experience with all these great guitar players talking about exactly the stuff you're talking about. Like, how do we do it? I can assure you that my friend Nigel has placed many a microphone and can tell you an awful lot. As some of you guys have heard me talk about, there's a room underneath the stage at Hillsong. Nigel and I spent, I don't know, the better part of an hour down there playing a guitar, handing it back and forth, just being guitar nerds. And they're mic'd up. As I'm kind of grabbing photos in preparation for this, there's, I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's kind of a rack of 6 amps, a pair of Fenders, a pair of matchlesses, and a pair of Fenders matchlesses, and the other pair, whatever the heck they are, Fender, matchless, and getting old. But the point being is that those are mic'd up. So the thing is that it's going to be great to hear his take about. And the great thing is that in this budding relationship with our friends at Multitracks, we're I'm going to have the opportunity to demonstrate some of Nigel's patches with his blessing. So it's not going to be like, hey Nigel, let me hear me play through your patch. It's not going to be like that. It's that those patches are in my account, and I'm going to be able to kind of play through the sounds, and we're going to be able to talk about what went into building them and what his thought is. So exactly to your point, it's like, I think, first of all, people are busy. So sometimes they don't always give you the recipe. They just, we live in a drive-through world, whether we like it or not, and, whatever. But the point being is what we want to do here for you is go, hey, this is what it is. This is how it's done. Flippin' love that. Okay. Jocard, thank you. With great pleasure. We're just hopefully getting warmed up. Awesome. Brett, yeah, I totally understand. Embrace the direct thing. Bought a GT100 probably 5 or 6 years ago and have been using it. Church ever since. I had to really get used to the difference between it and an amp. Here's all right. So here's the other side of it, right? Okay. So let's make the analogy of a drum set. Let's make the framework of the drum set with a volunteer sound tech. So so I'm going to turn this into a little teaching lesson, because one of the things that I also want to know is, I want to know, are you guys interested in recording? Whether it's, church stuff or just kind of in general. You'll hear me say it over and over and over again. Not everybody who plays at church just plays at church. So the point being is that when you're working on recording, the balance between the kick drum and the snare is the nuance of what drives the groove for the bass player. That kick drum is setting the downbeat of 1. 99 times out of 100 as music cycles through in groups of 4 measures. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 3, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 4, and boom. As it cycles through, those beginning ones of the 1st and the 5th and the 9th measures, those kick drums happening on the downbeat of 1 are kind of like, we're here, and if the average sound tech doesn't know that because they don't understand music, it's because we haven't shown them. So part of what we want to do is actually kind of work, hopefully educating people. We've got some amazing folks writing for the magazine. We've done a really bad job, so we brought this guy, Jem, in from Australia, who's going to start helping us out with our social media, which I'm very excited about because it's going to be great. And helping sound techs mix musically is a really important thing. In fact, there's an article about that in the issue of the magazine that's getting ready to come out. Point being is that if you have a front of house tech who doesn't know how to mix kick and snare, add an electric guitar with a microphone to that mix, we should be very grateful for modeling technology, because the good news is pretty much all they can do is turn the fader up or down. They're not going to be inclined to start twiddling knobs. The funny thing is that with this shotgun here, I was doing just a little bit of EQ on the video that I'm wrapping up for the D20s, and I'm sweeping the EQ. There's a little tiny bit of a ring in the room. Every room has a natural, see if I can do this without peaking anything. I peaked it. But basically, there's a frequency that's kind of a resonant frequency that one or more frequencies like that happen in the room. So I was kind of made a little spike, popped that puppy up, and was sweeping that back and forth, because usually when you find that frequency, you'll get really excited around that frequency. then you narrow it down even more and you find out where it is, and then you dip that frequency a little bit, and then usually you kind of split the difference because you usually go too far and it pulls some other frequencies around it, and that usually gets the offending frequency to go away. Now, if you don't know what you're looking for when you're sweeping frequencies, because you can go onto a website and go, oh, I'm supposed to sweep frequencies, that's great. But if there's not a musical example of like, hey, here's what we're doing, there's an offensive frequency here, by the way, here's a Pro Tools session, here it is, you go find the frequency and we'll meet back next week. What frequency was it? It would be an interesting pop quiz, right? So in any case, moving right along. Okay, let's see here. All right. Oh, there we go. So Forrest, our team is pretty old school musically, academic, not bar band hacks. In essence, me, I don't buy that, but it's pretty. It is. I think it's pretty church typical. With that, I often fret over fitting the team culture. Basically, need to hit the song's signature phrases and light noodling with cliche worship tones. Too sarcastic. No, that's pretty funny. You made me laugh. Got to keep the servant attitude to keep to the team and congregation. If I had a little bit more time, I'd be stalking your Facebook page because I'd be kind of curious to kind of see what mainstream music you've got. Metallica or whoever it is that you listen to in the mainstream. But I would love it, Forrest, if you can open up a little bit what you mean by I think it's with that I often fret over fitting the team culture. Can you break that down? Because I'll break that down into a bunch of verticals. The reason I kind of started tonight off with this kind of, hey, what can I do, right? That's going to change the atmosphere. Again, that question, that we very rarely get asked at church is like, hey, what can we do to make this experience better for you, right? Church is not a drive-through, right? And there is not an opportunity to critique, in spite of the fact that there's a suggestion box. That's not really the culture we're in. For good, bad, or in between, it just is what it is, right? So every culture has its imperfections. It's actually one of the things that I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to, or if I'm going to ask Nigel. Okay, my wife grew up Hillsong. Like so much of my DNA as a believer is things that I've learned through spiritual inheritance of people like Ian Fisher, who provided pastoral care to the original Hillsong team. He's just a tall tree, planted in the Lord. He was the guy that was pouring into young Nigel Hendroff and Michael Guy Chislett. And, that sort of care, the reason Hillsong is Hillsong has a lot less to do with the music and a lot more to do with the team culture. But not every team has a great team culture. I don't know if we made an analogy of the Warriors when they were kind of in their heyday. I think there was a super healthy team culture. It didn't hurt that the majority of those folks were believers and that was part of what the culture was. But, not every church, is all the pieces fit perfectly. Arguably that's kind of the part where God kind of throws us in the spiritual blender and expects us to kind of not get clobbered by the ice cubes that are being thrown in there and not get too pureed, right? What happens is God softens us up a little bit. So we learn to understand people that would do things differently than we would do them and have grace as we see them fall short, but also kind of go, it's kind of like if we were to talk about our signal chains, everybody were to post their signal chain. I would put my pedals in a certain order, and 30% would do it in a different order, and another 30% would do it in a different order, and that would be literally if we had let's say at a bare minimum 4 pedals, right? But because we all have our own way of doing things, what we want to learn to do better is celebrate our differences. But what we've got to get better at, I think, is in the process of celebrating our differences, find our common areas to build bridges or find places that we can agree to build bridges to. I remember very early on when I got saved, there was a very, very, very fine drummer. And his church decided they were going to play country western music on Sundays. And given that Chris Tomlin's new record has got a bunch of country folks on there, maybe they were ahead of their times. Who knows? Maybe they're on that record. But this guy who was a fine drummer was just like, well, I'm not going to do it because I don't like country music. And I was like, you're missing what God's trying to tell you. And he just wouldn't hear it. And I got to tell you, there's a bunch of times where I just wasn't going to hear it. So let me ask you to ask yourself, what is it that God's in your ear about that you've got the earplugs in that you're missing? I encourage you to find that, because the neat thing is what we can do with each other is kind of go, how do we hear the things that we don't want to hear, right? How do we hear it's just like, hey, you know what? Maybe that 10 years from now, mind you, with amps like this, I would like to believe that's not the case, but there won't be amps on the platform, which is kind of heartbreaking, but it is what it is, right? Okay. Love that. Okay, let's take a look here. What's going on, Chad? How are you? Pleasure. Okay. What model rev are those? Those are the D20s, and they're basically like you took a Fender Deluxe reverb and threw it in the washing machine and added a master volume and an effects loop that's buffered. That's a series effects loop, and added a direct out with a ground lift and a separate drive control, so you can choose what the volume is coming out of the speakers, separate from how much signal is actually being passed from the house or vice versa. That is to say, you want to provide the right amount of signal going to the PA, and you can turn the amp down to a whisper quiet, but still have a little bit of stage volume. Pretty crafty, these rev guys are. All right, so I am not seeing any more comments coming through, but I can riff. So let's see here. Strategies for sound. It's an interesting thing that we live in an era of multi-tracks where we have access to these original recordings. There was a church that I was at. I'm going to keep it sweet, but the tracks were so prevalent, and I ultimately came to the conclusion, and I've never mentioned this church's name on the show before, nor will I, but every so often the lead vocal would sing these notes that were so out of tune that it was almost inconceivable. And I finally realized, I think he's always auto-corrected, pitch-corrected, auto-tuned, and that, like, literally it was so out of tune that even auto-tune couldn't find it. And I was like, oh, that's bad. So, this is where the me culture, getting back to my church, if we want things to be a certain way, I think the biggest thing that we can do is kind of go, what can we do that may be the glaring things that other people see that sometimes we don't want to see, right? I love volume. Volume is a special thing. I am enamored with volume, but I also want to be sensitive that not everybody hears things the same way I do. So, just kind of keeping that open mind and open heart. By the way, you guys got any questions for like Nigel and St. Pope and Stu G? Because I can kind of save them and kind of keep them in mind. So let's take a minute here also, and let's talk about kind of where I see this thing going. And I would love your feedback. Love. Ooh. Yes, so the direct level is separate from the amp level. Isn't that crafty? I mean, it's just like really kind of really super smart. And they're like $11.99, something like that. I mean, just like, huh. I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty much like the perfect amp for praise and worship. It's as if you kind of went, all right, Doug, if you kind of went, of all the amps that you've played, and you can collect the different features and kind of have a bunch of stuff. And by the way, the pull out on the gain control and getting the jangle there, I didn't see that coming. I've never had an amp like traditionally. You've got the boogie stuff, which has its own variation of push pull, controls and whatnot, which I've been using for a long time. I've got boogies here. Nope, can't see one, but they're here. and but usually it's a different kind of a shift as opposed to like instant jangle of like, oh. And there are a couple guitars, actually I'm going to totally rabbit trail, but I do that. But I will tell you what I'm learning. So I've bought, with the permission of Ms. Doppler, I've bought some new guitars. And the funny thing is that I love being wrong. I know that sounds really like, who loves being wrong? I love being wrong and kind of going, wow, I didn't see it coming. So the funny thing is, this guitar, it's a reissue of a '60s Telecaster thin line, and so I figure, oh, right, this is a guitar. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to do my imitation Corey Wong licks, and I'm going to go funky, funky, funky. Silly me, this is one of the best rock guitars I've ever played. I mean, the funny thing is, it's got the F hole, it's a Telecaster, and most of us know that Jimmy Page, a lot of the studio records that we believed were a Les Paul, Jimmy Page played a Telecaster all over Led Zeppelin. So the thing is that this guitar, and some of the others that have come into my quote-unquote demo collection, it's an interesting thing. The belief that I've had for decades and decades is kind of one guitar was going to kind of be the way I could kind of get quote-unquote my sound. And it's an interesting and it's a dangerous place to go, and not necessarily super popular with wives per se, or the women that are watching with husbands, unless they're like, yes, honey, may I buy you another guitar this week, please? But the funny thing is that as I'm discovering with these instruments, a different instrument allows you to capture a sound that you wouldn't be able to capture. It's just kind of like the same thing that as I was figuring out, I was like, oh, right, I've got to put, there is a certain location on, if you will, that this is, well, normally X and Y and X are like this, but if you turn it on its side, the X and Y axis, that there's really kind of this one little location where those 2 points meet. That's kind of the sweet spot for the mic to sit. The same thing kind of happens when you're going for that right input source for an amplifier to try and get it to go and do that particular thing. And, I was at the Solo Dallas booth at NAMM, last winter NAMM show, and I played this. Solo Dallas, of course, is famous for making the AC/DC, instant Angus is what I think their kind of tagline is, and it's totally true. But the thing is that what I wasn't anticipating was that you plug one of their boxes into a deluxe reverb, and a deluxe reverb becomes this. It's kind of like the same thing that happened when you pull the gain control. It's like it takes you someplace where you've never heard that particular thing go. I've never heard. I'm a big fan of 6v6 tubes. They are lovely. What's neat about them is they squish a little bit. They don't make it hard to play. They have a lovely tone, but they're not classically jangly. Like the jangle factor, I was like, oh man. And it's not in the stand here, but or in the coffin. But there is there's a 70th anniversary broadcaster that guitar, and in the middle and in the neck position is the most jangle happy instrument I've ever played. And I was just like, ooh. And so, what I found is that the instrument, it's going to be a funny analogy, but I hope this will resonate with some folks. Imagine you've got a still pond, and you want to create rings just to have this perfect ripple. Got to have the right stone. And the guitar is that perfect stone. Did you get that perfect progression of ripples? And, I really had decided in my head that, you can kind of do it with one instrument. I've changed my mind about that a lot. Let's see what we've got here. Ooh. Oh, my word. Okay, hang on a second. Let's see here. All right. Thanks, Brad. Aaron, hey, I need a safe place to really cry out to God. I'm already a worshiper, but after working at a grocery store during COVID, I need a place to stream where no one will freak out if I wail in the middle of a song. And so let me see if I've got you right, Aaron. Where we're talking about, are we talking about crying out through the instrument? Or are we talking about one of my favorite moments is watching somebody on the platform just reduced to tears. I think it is so awesome because that quite often worship can be, if we're not careful, perfunctory. So when you watch somebody just bawling, it's awesome. But I think you're talking about that wailing, or maybe both. And it's an interesting thing. Whether it's David Gilmour or John Mayer or Stevie Ray, or there is something about Neil Schon, Joe Satriani. When you think about those emotive players that can take music and express emotion in a way that you can just totally go, thank you, David Gilmour. I needed that. Thank you, Neil Schon. I needed that, right? The guitar does that. The interesting thing is that I would love to believe that, it's an interesting thing. I'll do a little tiny bit of a reveal. At the magazine, we work very closely with record companies. Great bunch of people, actually, really, in spite of the reputation that the record industry has as a whole, the folks that we've encountered, or I've encountered in the Christian music business, that are kind of doing their thing now are great people. They have a total heart for God, and they really care about their artists. I mean, it's just incredibly evident. And so the thing is that, there is this strange shift that's happening where we've now got this single-driven process where people used to buy a record. Now it's kind of like, the record companies have to work a lot harder for their successes in some ways. And yes, you've got some big ticket worship outfits, the Hillsongs, the Elevations, the Bethels. But at the same time, in a single-driven market, it's different than when you used to buy the new Hillsong CD, right? It's just a different time. But the point being is that I would love to, Zach Williams was the guy I was kind of like, and I interviewed him once. I'm like, when are the guitar solos coming? Because if there's anybody that would kind of like, whether you're a Slash fan or not, it's like if there was ever anybody that can kind of get Slash in there playing on a worship record and maybe get that guy saved. I was actually, Duff McKagan's got this shirt that says basically, I think it says "Not Today, Satan." I'm like, that's an awfully Christian looking shirt there, bud. I don't know Duff, but I was like, you're not leaving too much space between the lines to be read. It's pretty obvious, I was like, this is cool. Duff's been sober for a long time, right? So the point being is that I could see there being some tear your heart out guitar solo, because the guitar has that ability to convey. Another great example, I'm getting ready for the magazine and for you, really, this is what this is about. This is kind of not messing around anymore. Let's do some demos of gear for worship musicians. Let's talk about how we're setting it up. Let's give people the insight, so it's not just like, hey, buy my patch. That's great. And again, not kicking sand on anybody. And the worship tutorial folks, that's not them at all. They're awesome. So the thing is that the idea of creating demos for worship musicians around all this gear, super excited about that. And to be able to take that journey together, going to be pretty exciting. So in the midst of that, I've been listening to different songs that I'm going to do as kind of little instrumentals of worship songs. And, so I'm going through all sorts of stuff. And I was listening to the piano intro of Forever. I'm just like, oh, the thing about a melody played from the heart, you could do it on any instrument. You could do it on a kazoo. Maybe not a kazoo. Hard to really take a kazoo seriously. Just saying. Maybe a little verb and delay. Maybe you can get there. But, but the point being is that there's something about, that piano part at the beginning of Forever. I'm just like, And it's an amazing song, but literally, I'm kind of like, I keep waiting. I loop my YouTube videos. You know, you can kind of, I think it's option click and then brings up the loop thing. So I just listen to these songs over and over and over and over again. I'm taking in the information. I'm taking the vibe. It's also like we've talked about before. It's a great way to learn the cadence of a song. It was so funny. I was headed up the stairs the other day, and I had a song. What was the name? I think it's called "Heart Needs a Second Chance." It was a 38 special song back when dinosaurs were roaming the earth. I knew the guy that got picked up by that band, Danny Chauncey. He's a Facebook friend. I haven't spoken to him, but a couple of words, 30 years ago. But we became Facebook friends. But beautiful guitar playing on that track. But there's a spot where it goes into the bridge, and as I was walking up the stairs, I'm like, oh, it's about to go into the bridge, and you begin to feel the cycle of a song if you listen to it enough. And I'm like, this is where it is. And that's one of the special things about listening to songs as you loop them. It just really kind of you get in the grease with those songs, and it's a valuable way to learn. Okay, let's take a look at this. Mids. That's so funny. I'm making friends with mid-range, by the way. Shane, what's going on? Gear Whisperer. There we go. Hang on a second. Big. Okay, good. All right. Jocard, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I play electric guitar at church with a big sound system, as we are using a 32-channel Presonus Studio Live board. Awesome. But our sound guy is having a hard time getting my guitar in the mix. I am using a Fender Professional guitar. Awesome. I take it you mean American Professional. So see if I can do this in a sensical way without rabbit trailing and go through the range of things. 1, do you have a wireless guitar unit? 2, are you using direct into the PA, or are you kind of using some sort of mic'd sort of solution? Regardless, your ability to kind of get front of house and hear what does my guitar sound like, not only front of house, but how does it blend with the other instruments? And here's the thing, there's fact-finding mission. Is it possible that your sound is not blending well with the other instruments? And I'm not just kind of, oh, it's about you. That's not what I'm saying. One vertical. Is that where part or more than part of the issue is? Is there a good blend? Let's forget about the guitar between the drums and the bass in the first place. And are you running in stereo? Are you running in mono? And okay, I'm just going to run through all the different possibilities here, because the other thing is that sound techs who play drums, don't go on a rant, Doug, like to mix the drums disproportionately hot if they err on one side or the other of mixing something too loud. That snare drum, for drummer-centric sound techs, they want that snare drum. You can hear the sound of the snares and every little snare rattling and all the nuance of the attack and the resonance and all of that, because they're fixated like a dog with a toy. And when a dog is fixated on that toy, that's where their focus is. They're not thinking about there's another dog that wants to play. No, it's me and that toy. I'm not saying that every sound tech that mixes that plays drums is like that, but I've seen it enough to kind of go, okay. So that is to say, if my hand is the equivalent of the snare drum, point made. If it's just too loud, there is no room for your guitar to fit. So go on a little fact-finding mission. Just kind of go, okay, what are all the reasons that my guitar is not being heard? What's my bit? Is it my tone is so wide that it actually, there's not a hole that it can all fit in? Is it that I have so much ambient sound that we're missing the transient, the initial attack? Is it that the initial attack is bright enough that it's a little pokey that they pull it down? Is it that my initial tack is not bright enough at all? So all it is this kind of what we sometimes say about the wrong Gibsons, where they're tubby or boaty. So they just kind of fart around in the mix, if you will. Definitively ask them what's not working and why, and get their take on it, and then use your ears to get your own take on it as well. And also notice, does it happen when somebody else is playing? The other thing you can do, get another guitar player to play as close to the way you hit the strings, and sit out there and listen to them playing through your rig and kind of go, huh, okay. And then begin to make those decisions. The other thing is like, how prominent are the tracks, if you're using the tracks, and then just kind of go, okay, if I were to start over, what would I have to do to build that sound to do that? And that's kind of how I used to approach things with the HD500. I would sit at home, kind of go, okay, let's forget about my sound. What am I going to do that's going to make a sound that has enough low end but not too much, enough mid-range but not too much, enough treble that you can hear the transient but not so much that you're like, oh. And imagine how that was going to sit with the sound that I heard front of house, and kind of go, this is, I think, is what it is. And then I would craft that sound, and I could kind of fine tune it. And after a while, it's like, there it was, right? I knew what to do with it. The neat thing about the HD500 was the AC30 patch on that. When you turned up the drive, which is not something that's on a traditional AC30, it simultaneously brought the highs down. Whoever did the design on that, I think it was Jeff Slingleff, who's now at Boston, did the, you can see directly behind me, the Waza tube amp expander right on top of the Roland RE150. There's the Waza tube amp expander. There's one there in the rack as well. But the point being is that finding that thing that sits in the right place. It's the other reason that I love stereo. And so the demos for these, one of the things that I did, and I'm walking through the strategy around this, is dual mono. So dual mono enables you to, with two different amplifiers, they're never going to sound absolutely identical, which means if you pan them left and right, nobody's going to have some weird experience on the left side or the right side, or your left and right, whatever. And in turn, one of the demos that I didn't do that I started to in my pre-production was leave one completely dry and use the other one to either be completely wet or a wet-dry blend. So it's basically dry, mix. So the point being is what that enables your sound tech to do is to be able to kind of toggle between the two. Imagine pulling the one that's when you need the punch of just a dry amp for a section where you just want a little bit more dry, but you don't want the delay in there, and then being able to layer those two in there. So a dual mono rig, but using it kind of one of them, it's not mono anymore, but when I think about when I get into my stereo madness, the stereo doctors out there, dotted eighth, quarter note, separate delays on either side, neither of which is so strange that if you're on the room, you're just hearing the dotted eighths on one side and the quarter notes on the other, neither of which you're going to be like if you listen to a traditional stereo chorus, one side is just the direct sound, the other's going, if you're stuck on the side of the room that's going, you're just like, give me a motion sickness bag. It's weird, right? So the point being is that by using the stereo field, what I'm doing is I'm getting out of the way of the worship leader. You've heard me talk about it a bazillion times. But the other thing is I'm creating a place on the outside of the mix where the bass isn't, where the snare drum isn't, where the kick drum isn't. I am competing a little bit with the keys, but having that whole. Now, the fact that you've got a 32-channel mixer, if they're capable of operating that and arguably creating some sort of broadcast mix on that console, then maybe just kind of having a conversation and go, what can I do? What can we try? The other thing is that bring and this is the other problem about the drum factor. I was going to say, have them create a board mix, but by the time you take a board mix home, if the drummer's playing at any volume in the room, the board mix is pretty much useless to you. But also, if there's the broadcast mix, what's the broadcast mix telling you? Is it the wrong mic? Is it placed poorly? Is it going direct out? Are you using a mic model? Ooh. Big deal. Big deal. For example, these guys, there is a 2 notes remote is embedded. Basically, the output is how you get the virtual speaker cabinets into those guys. So there's basically a rotary control called virtual cabinet that allows you to load natively on the face of this thing 6 of them, but there's actually 128 presets hiding in there, at least slots that you can get to via MIDI. Well, your average guitar player kind of goes, oh, I've got a modeling amplifier. Not every guitar player has had a 57, a 421, the Roswell Pro Audio Mini K47s, 121s, and, Rhodes and various other mics back there. So, and as well as some really great Audio-Technica mics. I've got a $2,500 Audio-Technica mic, which is the Fashiza when miking some sort of Dumble amplifier, which is this very strange, bizarre, in a great way, huge range of frequencies. Very hard to capture those amps. But that mic is perfect for it. So the point being is you may have the right sound in the wrong mic. Again, it's kind of like, I'm trying to read the fine print, but I got the wrong glasses on. That's what your microphone is. You get the wrong lenses on there, you're never going to be able to capture what the fine print is telling you. Not only that, if you're trying to read what that fine print is telling you to somebody else, and you got the wrong lenses on, it ain't going to happen the way you want it to. So that information doesn't get translated well. Super, super important. I got to make a note to myself about that. Melissa Doppler. Our church has been teaching on discipleship in recent weeks. How do you see discipleship in the context of a worship? Oh my word, that's Mrs. Doppler right there, Ms. Doppler. Never a good thing when I pause that long, because it means I'm making sure I don't say the wrong thing. If I could make an analogy, I think church is supposed to be a combination of a hospital and a doctorate university. People come in, a lot of people are wounded. All sorts of stuff that arguably happened long before the last time they got burned in another church. It happens. It does. Most of the people that I've known who've been in church leadership have had some thing. It's unfortunate, right? In a perfect world, it's a hospital, the patients get healed, and then once they're kind of up out of bed, you start them off on the soft food, and then you get them up to the meat, right? And then what you do is you build disciples so they can go out and make more disciples, right? The idea is that we find ourselves in helping other people find themselves. That's kind of what I tried to say at the beginning of this show, was just like, this show is about discipling guitar players. That's really what it comes down to. If that were the essence of what it is, it's talking about how to hopefully grow the right heart. I was going to say develop, but it's not something you develop. You develop muscles. You grow a heart. You actually have to till that soil. You have to go, there's fertile ground there, but I'm going to have to go ahead and do that. And I was talking to my wife about Israel the other day. There was a photo, and I think I'm going to get it right. Basically, the Negev is the name of the desert that Israel was built in, and it was this flippin' barren wasteland. I mean, just cracked soil, and they just kind of came out of World War II. My dad is Jewish, and they just kind of like, we're by the sweat of our brow, and underneath this baking sun, gonna do what we know how to do, work. I could say it. I couldn't post it on social media. I saw this thing on the. I didn't read the whole thing, but it was basically this group of socialists, and it's basically the sign said, "Why work?" And I'm just like, that's what's wrong with this country. Just like those people would die in the desert and go, it's somebody else's fault, as opposed to like, we're in the desert. This is awesome. Let's build a country. So the point being is that we have to decide to grow a heart. It's a decision. And those of us who have had heartbreaks, which is all of us, we have to decide to let God get in and mend that and not blame him. And just kind of go, you know what? that which was meant for evil, God's going to turn it around and make it somehow something that I can use to help somebody else. Because the great thing about the discipleship story that we miss is that we think all this stuff that happens to us is about us and our journey. It's not. It's preparing us to help somebody else with their journey. And this is gets back to the my church business about it. It's like, I want a pony. It's just like, no, you don't really want a pony. You think you want a pony. What you really want is a pony so you can give it to a kid that actually has nothing. That's what you want. But I want a pony. It's a different type of discipleship. That's why I don't have kids. I don't mean like, my dad spanked me, and I deserved it when he spanked me. It was good. It's like, it's like if you're bad enough, you're going to get a different type of discipleship made for a stronger character. There was a time when parents were parents and kids actually understood the respect of authority. There, I said it. So that said, worship teams are discipleship schools. They look like they're bands, but they're not. And this is the thing, is I think as musicians, this is where these nuances of this, and I'd love to have Nigel talk about this because he's a music director as well. And what you guys haven't had the benefit of seeing is watch Nigel have a team meeting. And Melissa and I were there when Darls was still there, and we were kind of like, right around the same visit, we ended up hanging out under the stage at Hillsong, as I would say, the platform. Got a chance to watch Nigel talk to the team and watch Darls talk to the team. And you're like, oh, it's just like, it's like that I'm not going to quote that scene in that movie, but it's like, I'll have what they're having. I quote it without quoting the movie. You just kind of go, oh, it's the real deal, right? You grow tall trees in fertile soil. And it's a decision to create that fertile soil, and it's a decision to create the tall trees. And the tall trees are the result of guys like Ian Fisher, women like Darls, women like Melissa Doppler that choose to disciple people. So worship teams, it's a discipleship university that masquerades as a band. I said it. I love it. Okay. Okay, let's see. Brett, what am I using to amplify or process the guitar? So basically, the whole little vibe here, that what you were hearing there, was basically I've been working on this demo for this guitar. This is the Eric Johnson Virginia guitar, and there's a particular video of Eric Johnson playing the Cliffs of Dover. I think it is Austin City Limits, and it's the best version, and the tone is just nuts. And he's actually in this pickup selection here. The classic Eric Johnson mod here is taking this tone control and backing it off just a little spot. That is to say, this control he's got set up for the bridge pickup, which is not how a Strat, careful there, is normally set up. But so there's this little progression that I've been working on. That's basically that preset. It's compression, a pair of deluxe reverbs. As I customized that, I got rid of the cabinet model part of that. And what I like to do is I like to manipulate the stereo field in such a way that one's the vibrato channel and the other is the normal channel. Panned 30% in on the left and right, going out into a dual delay, dotted eighth quarter note, and then going out into a reverb. Kind of going for that Jimmy kind of Eric Johnson kind of a vibe. That in turn is going into the two effect returns on those amps. Those amps have the ability to run at either 4 watts or 20. I'm running at 20 so I can get more headroom at I wouldn't call it a room volume. Melissa wouldn't call it a room volume, but at volume. And you don't want to run into the headroom. You want that clarity. That for one thing, when you're going for a distorted signal, that's a different thing. But when you want to hear the clarity of the bloom of a clean guitar as the compressor kind of begins to let go of the note a little bit, and then at the same time you're hearing the pings of the delay, and the pings of the delay are going into the reverb. That's where the headroom really matters, because you want to be able to hear all those events happening with some blend of a little bit of hair, but not so much that it gets messy and sloppy. That's why the 20 watts is so important. And in turn, I'm just miking that up with those pair of microphones. The Mini K47s are pretty much like my go-to microphone. I can grab just about any sound of just about any amp in the room with those, and that's a rare thing, including bass. Great question. Okay, Gear Whisperer Shane. Jocard. I'm currently using a Digitech multi-effect, which is connected direct to the mixer. Awesome. Okay, so then it's a matter of, hang on, let me make sure, was that you asking about the front of house? Hang on just 1 second. Yes, it was. Okay, so a buddy of mine works at a very famous gear company. And I was like, well, which model are you using in your Helix? And, oh, I was using this. I'm like, try using the Deluxe Reverb. And I got this email on Monday morning. It was like, my guitars never sound better, you know. And sometimes we're doing all the right things, but we miss one little piece where we're using the wrong, you know, we got the wrong glasses. And so, for example, let's make the analogy that we're looking at something, and that is traveling through the lenses in the process of being consumed. So that's where the amplifier, you've got all this stuff happening, but it passes through the lens of that amplifier. So that amplifier is the wrong nuance to fit the room, the team, your guitar, and all it takes is a little bit of fine tuning. And it's interesting because when I was first plugging that in, I kind of knew that I wasn't supposed to use a speaker model into an actual speaker. And it wasn't until I turned the speaker model off and went in and altered the preset, I had to hook it up to USB, and I'm in there, and I turned it off. I was like, night and day. Because I've used, like, times where you're kind of not supposed to, but I still did it anyway, like in using Helix into Power Cab. There's been times I just left the speaker cabinet on. There's been times I've run Helix out into an actual amplifier, and I left the power amp modeling on, and it sounded good. In this particular instance, it was very clear that using the speaker model into the speakers was an incredibly bad idea. So the point being is that sometimes, you know, there's just that one little thing that just kind of everything goes south around. And fixing that makes you just kind of go, oh, holy cow. And that is, so I would suggest setting up the same preset with a couple of different amps, and that is, you know, a couple of different amps and different microphones. If you can try, if there's a Neumann U67 or 87 model in there, give that a shot. Guaranteed to warm things up a little bit. Okay, let's see here. Make sure you have enough mids to sit well in the mix. Sometimes you need to bump up the mids, especially with modeling gear. So it's so the interesting thing about mid-range is that, you know, I came up in the 80s. The first thing I would do to go to over to amps like mid-range down. So I've kind of had this strange courtship with mid-range where I find like I'm starting to turn the mids higher than the treble. I'm like, oh, my former metal self would be like, what are you doing, Doppler? But in the process of doing it, I'm like, ooh, it's that little bit of clarity. Brett, you're totally right on the money. It's just like, now I can hear it. Where the treble is just like, you know, mids are in the middle, right? Just like, there's the stuff up here, and there's the stuff down there, and then there's the stuff in the middle. And the stuff in the middle is it's guitar land. So yeah. Oh my word, she's at me again. She's gonna make me work for it tonight. I love it. How is the expression of personal worship different to corporate worship, and how do you make time for personal worship time with God when life's so busy? I don't have an answer for that. That was not me being a smartass. I guess I have to answer that. Don't you love it when God speaks through somebody you know? You're like, oh. That's actually, it's an interesting thing because actually I'm not quite as guilty as that's charged. I start my day in prayer, start my day in the Word, although not a huge consumer of the Word, to be honest. And then I find that I'm listening to a strange blend of pop music and worship music. And for me, God speaks to me through music in uncommunicated language. That's the best way I can say it. But also at times it's communicated. I remember at NAM, Michael W. Smith was did the NAM Night of Worship, and when he did Surrounded, I was just in tears. I was just like, I was just shredded. But it was an awesome shredded, um, because God can say things through music and through a worship leader that speak to conversations that you're having with God, where He's saying things through song and music that are not a literal exchange of what He's saying to you, but it is the relative exchange of what He's saying to you. And that's like, I don't think I could quote the words for forever, but I've listened to it probably 200 times in the past 2 weeks, right? But something about that song really ministers to my spirit in a way that I can't put into words, but I know is very true. And that is, for me, kind of how I worship. And so the thing is that I think it's really easy on a worship team to kind of think people should have this type of expression of what they do or that type of expression, but we are uniquely individual. And I think we've got to find a way of kind of finding that blend, which is important. Uh, hey, there we go. We've got some folks on YouTube that I missed. Pedro, thank you so much. And Joe, thank you. Really. Thank you. Um, to whom much is given, much is required. The best I can do is to. I'm really excited about this season. The ability to serve people. This is kind of gets back to this corporate worship versus personal worship. I think it's not a matter of kind of doing stuff so God sees you doing it. Serving people is stepping into part of the calling that is unseen, right? Like, the funny thing is that, for example, if we were to use the gym and your physical body as an example, when you go to the gym and you're lifting all the weights and doing all of that stuff and everybody can see, but you're at home at 11 o'clock at night and you're going to be like, I really want some ice cream. Ice cream you ain't it in the gym working your triceps. We don't bring ice cream me out to the gym, right? We don't bring a quarter ice cream just like, yeah, let me just wolf down some ice cream. We are selective in how much we allow ourselves to be known. So the great thing about personal worship is, I think, one of the biggest expressions of personal worship is playing a discipling role in the lives of others, whether they're conscious of it or whether you're telling them about it or not. And it is the interesting thing about serving people is that you're not supposed to make it super obvious. When it's done well, people feel cared for, not served. Waitresses and waiters do a great job of serving you, but they're not there to care for you. There is a transaction involved. They are working for some reward. Totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But the great thing about discipleship is the reward is a pay it forward thing. You're investing into somebody, so hopefully in ways that are not communicated verbally, they will grow and the Holy Spirit will use them as a vessel where they speak into them, and in turn they go out and disciple others, because They just don't know how not to, right? Oh, ho, ho, ho. Okay, let's see here. Yes, Jacquard, bumping the mids up a little bit is a great way to just get the guitar to poke out in the mix. And it's subtle. And the other thing is you can try sweeping, like I was talking about before that. Finding that if you can take the ability, um, if you've got a looper in your rig, just kind of loop some phrase or chord or something. Come out to the sound desk if you can, and if there's time, get on an EQ, and then do a sweep across the frequencies and find the frequencies that are like troublesome and kind of woofy, and then find the ones that seem to provide a little bit of clarity and memorize what those frequencies are. And maybe you've got an EQ inside your Digitech unit that will allow you to find where those EQ points are and kind of add or subtract the appropriate amount of EQ. Um, Shane, I won't use the word jaded, but I'm not as close and deep in worship as I was. How do you get back to where you once belonged? First love, that's an interesting thing. Let's see. I think it's important to, it's if I were to take the analogy of frequencies, it's a wave, right? It's not this static thing. It is literally a frequency is the number of times a wave is expressed over the course of a period of time. So we have a frequency as believers and as musicians that if we go in the natural sense of kind of how we're wired, seasonal, right? We live in seasons. There's a frequency, winter, spring, summer, fall. It's like this thing. It happens. It's around us everywhere. It's in nature. But we don't want to live in our natural selves. We want to actually elevate above that. And sometimes it's a matter of, it's interesting, Kim Walker Smith said something about, back to the my church business. She was saying, look, the person that you think you need may not be the person that you actually need at all. There may be some, as she was speaking to young worship leaders or female worship leaders, it may be some mother in the church that has nothing to do with the worship team, but she's got the wisdom and is the tall tree that you need to find shelter underneath. And so sometimes we just have to, our desire to seek has to be greater than our desire to rest. There's a time for rest, but when our hunger is great enough, then it becomes insatiable. And that's spiritual discipline, right? And so sometimes it's a great question, Shane. And I'll go first person with you, sure. Um, I'm not great at sitting in the Word for like extended periods of time and meditating. I can go with short bursts and just go, what's God saying to me in this today that I need to apply to my heart right now and walk into my day with? And that's just kind of the relationship we have, right? I wish I could be some deep in the Word, kind of sit there for 45 minutes. I just can't do it. So the other part is kind of finding out where that balance fits, right? And not kind of beating yourself up over it. But at the same time, kind of going, how do I stay in a place? And I'll use a little motivation for you. For me, God has made a very clear understanding that by keeping that point of connection, He's going to have some level of anointing that I get a chance to taste and carry, right? And it's like Nigel's a great guy, to using this example, and that's hopefully going to be one of the things I'm going to make a mental note to ask him about. Let's talk about the anointing, right? That guy, he plays, and because of the spiritual weight that he's learned to carry, and he's been at this for a long time, Again, one of the questions that I may or may not ask, and because it's, when somebody is a public figure, there are times you just don't ask them about their private struggles, right? It's just not appropriate. But I can tell you one of the things that I would love to just go, we've all got stuff that we struggle with. How do you stay strong? And what do you do in the areas that you're not as strong? I bet he would have some incredible gold because, you got to think about any musician like that that's out all over the world. Everybody's telling you how amazing you are. And, there are times you're far away from your family. It's just like, that's a recipe for disaster for somebody that's not spiritually and emotionally mature. And there was, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Ian Fisher. The moment he got back to the hotel room, he just went straight to his room. Or got back to the hotel, he just went straight to his room. Above a certain number, he never went into the channels on the TV. Because there's, you don't know that there's stuff there, but you don't want to find out that there's stuff there. He was just like, 2 to 13, I'm not going to get into any trouble, right? And just building that hedge of protection around your life. And treating your life as a sacred vessel means that you're then able to have more anointing, more overflow of that. So the point being is I will encourage you is find the way that you can get more connected. Is it listening to more worship music? Is it sometimes going back and revisiting? I have been in this journey of looking for instrumental possible worship songs to do in these gear demos. Went back and listening to some of the early Hillsong United and just like the time has come. I was just like, it's pure genius. And I'm like, I'm the biggest, Nigel and Michael Guy Chislett fan in the world. There is none bigger. And just hearing what they were doing, and it's musically very intelligent, but yet really rough. And the guitars are screaming loud and feeding back. Like Chislett's got like a Marshall half stack and a couple of AC30s and just crushing it. I'm just like, in his 20s. I'm just like, oh, look at this kid. And look at him now, so great question. I saw something poke in, there we go. Joe Lewis Band. Doug, I was first made aware of your talent through Sabago. Love to chat with you about the mag. Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I run seasonally, but would love to shoot me a message. If you're on Facebook, just shoot me a message in Messenger. I am not fast. I'm not slow. I'm somewhere in between. And I used to be really, really not good at getting back to people in Messenger because I didn't actually check Messenger. It's a bad form of communication. Like if you have a home phone, you don't pick it up. So thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it. And I love the Sebago Sound stuff. Where is... there it is. Double Trouble right there. Love that. Awesome. Awesome, 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 awesome. Okay. Yeah, Shane, just find your way back. And pray to God about it every day. Just ask him, how can I get back to my first love? He'll answer that question. Looping the song, we call it being one with the song. I love that, Tim. Being one with the song, becoming one with the song. Hang on a second. All right. The Dopster is texting that to himself. I love that. I will text that to myself. Come on. That is what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see here. Come on. Get back to the right window. There we go. Okay. Show card. Yep, our drummer is our sound tech. But saw that one coming. Hey, what's going on, Paul? How you doing, man? Thanks so much, my friend. Okay, that's so funny. Okay, so look, it is 7:38. You guys are awesome. I was up very late last night, and I was up very early this morning. And I have more work to do tomorrow, and I want to be judicious about it. But I also want to be faithful in serving you guys as I can. Next week, we've got the worship tutorial folks coming. And in case you haven't met Fuller, who he's just Fuller. He's a regular writer and worship musician. He's got a series going on right now about basically team rostering, which is awesome. And then there is Bradford Mitchell, who is the young gun there, who I absolutely adore. He's kind of like, he's just great. And he's a great guitar player, and his enthusiasm and his heart is just awesome. And then there's Brian Wall, the founder, who co-founded it with Fuller, Brian Michael Fuller. But those guys, I just love them. And we've really forged a friendship, a bromance, honestly. As awkward as that sounds, it's just totally true. So they're going to be on here. They just celebrated their 100,000th download of a Helix patch that they created. It's like, think about that. 100,000 patches that you created. The people who are using a bunch of that stuff they give away. So it's not like they gave 90,000 away and people bought 10,000. But they're really generous. They hold it like this. They've also got the second edition of the Worship Handbook, which is basically for worship musicians and, I should say, leaders on worship teams, especially worship pastors. We quite often come into a role and people give you the set of keys and say, all right, Sunday morning, and they don't really kind of go, here's the expectations. Here's where the person who was in the role before you, this is where they failed. This is what I think the challenges you're going to come up against. And this is how I'm going to help you grow into the role. And we're going to have this amazing discipling relationship. Somehow in the busyness of life and the busyness of church, we get busy and it happens. But I don't think it's how God designed it. I think it's if we're not careful, Shane, the busyness of the times can take us away from the main event. Or Doug, right? But it's a matter of just kind of going, I pick a time, and for me, literally, besides telling Melissa that I love her and giving her a peck on the cheek, my first words of the day are prayer. And I learned that from the guy that was kind of Javier Gaitan, my first real second really spiritual father. But he was the first guy that really spent a lot of time pouring into me, a lot of heart. And in so doing, he just pray before your feet hit the floor. And I was just like, my feet are actually on the floor, but before I'm answering email, before anything, I'm in prayer. I'm actually putting on my spiritual armor is actually what it is. And this is kind of this whole prayer that I go into the day with my spiritual armor on, because you never know what's going to come up. Never know. And it's just kind of like putting on spiritual armor and then getting in the Word. I'm just like, you know what? I just go into my day and I'm just kind of feel like the lights are already on. And I'm just kind of, I am spiritually prepared as much as one can be at 6:30 in the morning. But at the same time, it's a very conscious process where I'm like, that comes first. And that's about 95% of the time. And it becomes part of my spiritual diet, if you will, where I'm just kind of like, that's where everything starts from, and it's the foundation, and I just put that before everything else, and it's just like, I'm kind of like, because I know there's going to be stuff that will come up over the course of the day. The great thing about having your spiritual armor on is you're just like, it's kind of like that Teflon thing, right? It's super important. I'm seeing a couple comments come in, so I don't want to miss anybody. Oh, Bruce, thank you, Doug, for all of your hard work for worship music. That is my publisher, Bruce Adolph. Hang on a second. Shane, for me, it's about tuning out the noise and just focusing on Jesus. There we go. I heard Paul Baloche talk about singing scripture and praying songs. Loved that. That was awesome. That really spoke to me. This is me quoting Melissa. It's not my nature to be still when I focus on walking in the holies of holies. So I become so aware of the presence of God. Our friend found her time with God uh, by drawing during her quiet times. Find the way that God connects with you. Connects. Uh, I think it's with your heart there. Forrest, with great pleasure. Um, really. Uh, Brett, again, thank you. Um, I'm a bromantic, says Melissa Doppler. Shane, uh, he's Teddy Brosevelt. There we go. Hey, Peter, what's going on? Uh, awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Next week, worship tutorials. The week after that, Nigel Hendroff. You can already see if you go onto YouTube that we've already kind of got the placeholders and so they'll go live there. When it goes live, it'll be on Facebook, of course, as well. And then after that, we've got St. Pope and Stoogie. I'm in hog heaven. Got to pinch myself, but I think I'm awake, and all the scheduling worked out. And next month we're going to have Tyler Bryant, Tyler, not Tyler Bryant. Okay, hang on. Oh gosh, this is what sleep deprivation does. Hold on. Gosh darn it. It's calendar on here. Okay. No, there we go. Tyler Logan plays mean guitar. He's got some stuff out with our friends at Multi Tracks, and we're just super excited. So, last little recap. What we're going to be doing increasingly is bringing people to speak into your lives about their perspective as worship guitar players, hence the Worship Guitar Show. What we're going to be doing is kind of creating some sort of format where there's probably going to be a little bit of a gear sliver, talking about some new piece of thing. I'll probably have a couple little pre-canned little demos, and I'll kind of talk about that particular piece of gear. We'll also then have, probably more often than not, and ideally every week, a guest that comes on, and that way we're able to kind of fill kind of a number of buckets, if you will, such that it's not just kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is great. I can kick my feet up and hear somebody else's perspective on worship. The goal is always serving you and serving your team. I will make this invitation. Please tell your friends and colleagues about this show and about the magazine. We work really, really, really hard, and we don't want you to inappropriately share, because it's always awkward. It's like, they're sharing every day, 5 times a day. That's not what I'm asking. But, we're really wanting to make the ask in a way that is not imposing, but we're believing that God's going to be doing some things with the magazine that he hasn't done before, and we're excited about that. We're going to be hosting a series of webinars again Thursday at noon. You'll be able to tune in. We're hosting this thing with our friends. Noon Central Time, which will be 10 Pacific Time. But for the next 3 weeks, starting on Thursday, we're just going to be unveiling a new video. So it's a debut of premiere. And then there's also going to be a song story. And the stuff is really, really, really well done. And then in turn, one of the members of the Gateway team is going to be hanging out. They've got just such a huge heart of worship. And again, Carrie Job is no longer there. But, Carrie is a product, if you will, of Gateway Church. That church is near and dear to the creation. And this is kind of the last point I want to circle back on. I will encourage you to, one, historically look back and go, whose life and whose lives would not have been the same in the good sense of the word, because there's the other side. I've made a few messes in my life. But whose lives did I change that would not have been the same had I not had the opportunity to serve them? And in turn, who is in my life now that I could do a better job of serving? And what is God trying to show me through all of that? Because here's the thing. Serving people builds a different type of discipline. But staying humble and having our ear to what God's trying to teach us in a season, sometimes through acts of service. That's where the value of the act of service is. Yes, it is about valuing the other person over your time and that cost, but also in a selfish but not selfish way, is God is really constantly using those opportunities to refine stuff, see things in others that we want to refine out of ourselves, or seeing things in others where we want to bring that out, define that versus refine it, right? And in those moments, God really it's kind of an opportunity, right? So Shane, I'm talking to you. Where are the opportunities in your life that are right in front of you that you're not able to get? And I can go first person. I've got one that I'm actively cultivating, and it's an important one. And it's God has entrusted me with somebody very special. So I'm not going to go any further than that, other than to say I'm just like, and sometimes it's kind of like a couple of the cars that I own. Sometimes it's a little bit of maintenance, but the thing is, sometimes we're about a lot of maintenance, and in kind of finding compassion for others, God builds the threshold for others to have compassion for us in the areas that we don't necessarily see things. All right, let's close in prayer. Lord, I just give thanks for this time of fellowship, Lord. Actually, more than fellowship, I know this sounds strange, but it goes deeper than fellowship. Fellowship is just kind of one of the pieces, but friendship and relationship are avenues that you allow us to kind of travel together, Lord. So I just pray that as we're on this journey, we find ways to serve one another. We find ways to look from the left to the right, and see those around us and feel their need, be sensitive to their wants, come alongside them in their pain, celebrate their victories, Lord, and just be present with one another. So I just pray that for anybody that's going through a hardship right now, these are challenging times, Lord. I just pray that you remind them that you are always large and in charge, and there's no situation that is beyond your capacity of bringing good out of, in spite of the fact that we live in a fallen and broken world, Lord. You make all the pieces fit in ways that are just beyond us, and that is a relief. So I just pray that anybody that's feeling a lack of relief, Lord, I just pray that you remind them that you're kind of like the best down pillow, that there is rest to be found in you, Lord. You are there to shelter us and to protect us and to give us rest when we can't find rest ourselves, Lord. So I just pray a spirit of rest for those that need it. I pray a spirit of rejuvenation for those that need it. I pray a reawakening of dreams for those that would love to see that. And so, Lord, I just pray that you spark something, and everybody that's here tonight, and in me, Lord. I just pray that you continue to refine me and prepare me for that which you would have me be entrusted with. So we ask all this in Jesus' mighty name, and I again give thanks for the opportunity for all my friends here. And just thanks so much. And in Jesus' mighty name, we all said, amen. All right, everybody, thanks so much. Wow, the prayer just never ceases to amaze. Whew, I needed that. All right, much love. God bless. I'll see you next week. If I can find the right button. There we go. God bless. Cheers.